Hi, everyone. Welcome to Prevention Education, the podcast that teaches you everything about prevention. Thanks for listening, and let's get started.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Prevention Education. As always, I'm Kylie, and with me today, I have Cory. So, Cory, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Cory Eslinger, and I work as a Prevention Coalition Development Coordinator with Preferred Family Healthcare's Prevention Department, where we cover about 27 counties in northern Missouri. So,
Yes, and we love having Cory on our team. He's very knowledgeable. So, I'll just leave it at that. So today, Cory is talking about a topic that he knows really well. He's very smart in this topic. And it's kind of school policy, kind of vaping, and maybe some other substances, and the topic of handle with care. So I threw everything at everyone at once, but we'll kind of unpack it as we go.
yeah, it's a lot of stuff to kind of look at and hear and see, and then when we break it down, it'll become overwhelming as well. But the whole idea, I think, today is just kind of to look at some things. It's fairly new for us as well, even though vaping's been around for 10 years or better.
Yeah.
So, but we're starting to see a lot of movement. So, and that's kind of why we're here to talk about it now. So,
Yeah,
always behind the curve.
Yes, but now we're trying to get ahead of the curve.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I guess to jump in with this topic, what is the issue, I guess, behind all of it, in your opinion?
Yeah, so a lot of the things that we're seeing in schools predominantly. So all this is kind of geared around schools. I know, we'll get there. It's okay. We'll get there.
Okay.
We'll surprise them. They know what's coming. Maybe
they do.
If they're watching. So handle with care, for one, is targeted around schools, community, and then the policy procedures geared around vaping is also school focused as well. So when we look at schools and their concerns, what we're seeing a lot of is something we've never seen before per se in school history, with the aggression, the mental health concerns, the vaping, substance use in schools. And so we don't have a plan, so to speak. The policies don't reflect it. The procedures don't reflect it. And, when you tell somebody, hey, you got caught vaping and guess what? You're kicked out of school. What's that do?
Exactly.
And so, it used to be a free day off. Well, now it's a free day off to go do the other stuff that we got kicked out of school originally to do in the first place. So kind of getting into some of that, and hopefully some of this will be very enlightening. If you know a school or community that needs any of these resources, share the podcast, reach out to us, and we would love that opportunity to kind of work through and unpack it more than what we're going to unpack today. So
exactly. Yeah. There's going to be a lot more than what we talk about, because there's not unlimited, but there's a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of things that are very useful for communities, schools, just like parents, students, peers, everyone. And just educating on this topic is super important because it's becoming so common in our world. Yeah.
Yes. Changing the norm. That's why we're here. So
exactly. Yeah. With one person at a time. That's the goal.
Yes.
We're going to rewind a little bit because I completely forgot our introduction question. Leave it to me to just ignore that.
It's a Monday morning. Hey.
It is. And it's feeling like a Monday morning. Yep.
Still have a coffee. It's okay.
Oh yeah. I just got my water.
Yeah.
So this one is actually really fun this week. And if you're listening to this and you want to comment your answers too, definitely feel free to do that. We love interaction. So it would be if you had a soundtrack to your life, and we're just going to say 2 songs. What would be 2 songs that you would put on that soundtrack?
Oh man. You know, I would love to see the comments to what people that do know me would put.
Yeah.
Because I think that would be a little different. But you know, I've always been a big fan of AC/DC and some of the 70s, 80s, you know, rock bands and things like
Yeah.
that. So, you know, but I've also had that soft spot in rap and hip hop, and I listen to everything.
Yeah.
So, you know, and with that being said, you know, my daughter, my youngest one, is a big fan of the song Oceans. So it's a little more faith, religion based. So I would definitely have to put that on there just because it's held some value to us over the years and one of her favorite songs to sing. So that one would have to be on there. You know, and I don't know, little Cars, Lightning McQueen junkie. So, you know, life is a highway, you know, because it truly is. And where we go in the direction, you know, we've always got options to make a turn or split at the road or, you know, do those things. And it is what we make of it. So
yeah,
sometimes those paths, such as I was a rock road driving fool when I was a teenager. So, you know, the beaten path, the unbeaten path, trying to just explore and see. So yeah, I would say definitely Life is a Highway would also be number 2 on there. And you know, AC/DC would have to be in there somewhere, I think, just because. But little REO Speedwagon, maybe, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
So 50 Cent, you know, if that gives you
throw that in there. Yeah.
a plethora, you know, because I think you do have to, while we all are in seriousness and, you know, all the time, but I think if you make things lighthearted, a party, have fun, enjoy it, but do it responsibly. I mean, there's kids are going to be kids, teenagers are going to be teenagers, but I think if you give them the right environment to do and experiment and play with in those natures, you know, you can go backroading, but let's not drink. Let's wear our seatbelts. Let's do the safety things, have fun, enjoy it. And they still get to experience that. I think that's key. Because yeah, we were all kids once. We know what it was like. And, you know, I learned how to drive in a field in a Ford Escort 5-speed, and it didn't go well the first time, but you know, that was part of the experience. So
exactly. Yeah. And that's awesome. You have a much more thought out answer than I do.
Yeah, let's hear that.
I would love to say like all of my faith songs would be on it, but these 2 are like out of left field. My first one, I was a huge High School Musical fan, still am, love those movies. And it would be Bet on It, where Troy Bolton's like running around the golf course. I think it'd be that just because that's like such an iconic scene.
I would say Get Your Head in the Game, but you know, hey.
That's a good one too. That's such a good one. Yeah, even like Bop to the Top, that's a good, like all of them are so good. But Bet on It that takes the trophy.
Okay.
And then my second one, I really love this group. Unfortunately, I don't think they're a group anymore. I think he's gone solo. His name is Forrest, and their group's name was called The Surfaces. And they have a really good song. It's called Take It Easy. And it's just like low key, feels like you're on the beach, just vibing. And that's just like, whenever I go on a walk, I just listen to those kind of songs, and it's like calming, and I love it. Yeah. So those are probably my top 2. Right. I'm a big Surfaces person, so if you know them, you should listen to them more. If you don't know them, you should listen to them.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah.
Or just Forrest. He's making new songs, so, and they're really good, so you should look them up. All of our listeners, you guys should look them up.
Yeah, and they're not sponsoring us by no means. I mean,
No.
this is
Yes.
pure out of fun. So
100%. Good job, Nick.
no, I mean, I mean, if they want to jump on here and comment too, I mean, I'm not going to be opposed. But
oh yeah, I will have a little fangirl moment over here for sure. But yes, there's no sponsorship whatsoever on this episode.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, I think that's what makes these unique. And because you've done some podcasts in the past relating to music and things, and listeners, check that one out. I think it's been a while, but it's interesting how music helps kind of shape and depicts kind of who we are and how we cope with things. And we could get into the just self-care piece of it versus all the way into counseling therapies, but that's not this podcast. Sorry.
Maybe,
but
that's
it's there.
A good topic for our next one. So
get a hold of
maybe
our treatment,
throw that in somewhere. Yeah,
get a hold of treatment, talk to music. But and I think that's when we start thinking about, and that's always come up. It's kind of a little off topic, but we're going to go there because it's a podcast.
Let's do it. Yeah.
But when you think about it and you look back to at the end of when you're in your 60s, let's just say, and you look back on your life, you've got those warm, heartwarming songs that have those time capsules in your life, and you look and reflect back of this is how I viewed it. What does everybody view of me? Or how did I leave a legacy? Did I leave a memory for somebody else? And, and it starts when you're a kid, when you're a teenager, how those relationships were built, how the interactions were, how, and our boss, I got to use it because I have to say it, don't be afraid to fail, right? So that's how we learn. None of us are perfect. None of us have just came out into the world and said, hey, look at me and I'm nailing everything. And I think sometimes as parents, as school staff, as society, we forget that little bit of allowance for them. And they're learning, their brain's not developed until 25. I mean, so when you look at it, it's like, hey, let's work through that with them rather than, I grew up in an area of do as I say, not as I do. And that was confusing and conflicting, but guess what? I figured it out. I got it. And some of the stuff I probably did as they did, but I had to learn that lesson the hard way and on my own. And so, segue into where we're at with dealing with the schools and the policies and procedures and handle with care. It's allowing that to be embedded back. I'm going to say back into schools because I think it was there at one point in time.
For sure.
And so really kind of reestablishing that lenience, but understanding that, hey, what you're doing is wrong, but we're going to work through it rather than just saying, don't do that.
Exactly.
And now you're in trouble. So, I think that's what are your thoughts on that? I mean, we grew up in two different generation eras, so to speak. Pretty closely. So
yes, I think like for my generation, the second you got in trouble, like I got in trouble in sixth grade for something so tiny, and I was like an angel student, never did anything wrong, was terrified to do anything wrong. And one thing so small that didn't even count as a grade sent me to ISS. And so it was very much you get in trouble for one thing, whether it's the smallest thing or the biggest thing, whether it's like looking at someone else's work or getting caught in the bathroom for drinking, you had the same punishment essentially. And the first punishment was in school suspension. And then if it was like a second kind of like offense, I guess, it'd be out of school suspension and then expelled. So there was no like talking to anyone about what went wrong, or here's a program that can help you through this. It was just go home, think about what you did, or sit in this office and think about what you did, and then go back to class like nothing happened. So that's what I grew up with, was very much no help or explanation. Like, I still don't know why I got ISS. Like, I really don't.
Just call them back and ask.
Yeah. Like, hey, remember me from 2011?
They have no idea. They have no idea. Well, and
So,
I think that's
yeah.
And I think back in the day, that was effective.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, why was that effective? Well, this is why I think it was effective. You had parents that were heavily involved / very strict. So you get in trouble, you were more terrified of the consequences at home. So that OSS was detrimental. But I don't think that we're seeing that as much now. The new generation parenting, whatever that may be, isn't so much in parenting out of fear. So, and some say use the word coddled and all these other expressions. We're going to leave that all out of here because that gets political, and we're not going to do that today. But I think this different styles in parenting have really influenced the effectiveness of what the school's ability to do or have always done. Really turns that. So
for sure. And there's 4 main styles of parenting from a psychology standpoint. And like 2 are more, I don't know the word, more like punitive, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
And the other 2 are more kind of hands off. And I think you can definitely tell when a kid might get in trouble with, say, vaping at school. You can kind of tell what parenting style they have at home, because whether or not they're like, oh yeah, call my mom or dad or whoever takes care of me, like give them a call, tell them, or they're like, don't call,
Don't tell them. Don't call my mom. Don't call my mom.
Yeah. So there's just so many different parenting styles, and you never know. You just never know. Yeah.
And I mean, that plays a big role as well, which is why these policies and programs that we're gonna get to, don't worry,
we will.
Are so important because of the way that the parenting styles have changed over the course of the years. Because traditionally it was the parents, we've seen that shift, right? So the parents were the discipline, the enforcers and all that at home, at school, and now we've kind of reverted to it's the school's responsibility. And so, and sometimes this is going to be a beneficial piece because of maybe the trauma or the other things that the youth have experienced at home or in their past life, so to speak. And I say past life as if it's the foster care system or removal from their biological parents, whatever that may be. And so some of those resources and benefits aren't readily available, where hopefully with the change in the school system, they become more readily available where the youth are. And that's the key piece with this. So I know we went kind of like out here and circling. I get it. But we're getting there. I promise. So
we are. What, I guess, like, what would you say when people say like stuff does have to be done at the school because kids are there majority of the time, and they're not at home as much, so like school has a bigger influence on them? What would you say, like, regarding that, especially knowing the like tools and resources and programs that are out there? How would you respond to someone saying
that? We'll see if I can get this close to the way you asked that.
Okay.
So like, because a lot of the times when we go and teach like our mental health first aid classes and things like that, especially with like teachers, it's very valuable. And I point out to them, you got to figure out it's not in that traditional world anymore. You go back
Yeah.
50 years, let's say 50 years, you had a lot more factory work, parents, farming, your traditional 9 to 5 or sun up to sundown type of jobs.
Yeah.
And mom or somebody else in the house was home majority of the time. And unfortunately, that's not the world we're in anymore. There may still be some of those, yes, don't get me wrong, but I think now it's more common both parents are working. It may not be your traditional 9 to 5. So that kid's getting adult interaction and structure 7.5 hours out of the day, unless they're in sports, from the school system, teachers, coaches, paras, things like that. And then they may go home and not see a parent until 6 a.m. the next morning when they're waking them up to get them off to school again.
Yeah.
So, I think that's the big thing I drive home. No, that's probably not 90% of it, but that's probably good majority of some of the students, if not being raised in a dual parent / single parent ran household. And I say that meaning, yeah, they're married, you have both parents, but mom's working 3 to 11 as a nurse or overnights. So she's sleeping 3 to 11 or 3 to 10:30, gets up, goes to work overnight, comes home, gets your kid up, says hi, goes to bed while you're at school,
Yeah.
And so you start to see a divided family just because of that.
Yeah.
And so, I think school is such a detrimental time that, yeah, we need the studies, we need those things, but we also need to be helping and assisting in the tools and skills that may get lacked at home because of that. And so having some of those programs, policies, and even handle with care. So we'll touch on handle with care real quick because it's a little easier. There's a Missouri Juvenile Justice Association, MJJA, for the state of Missouri, is heading the handle with care effort for Missouri. And so what handle with care essentially is getting law enforcement, first responders, some places have social services, different things like that, and the school all on the same page and communicating in a very discreet / informative manner. So what I mean by that is, let's say Johnny, who is 12, is at home and law enforcement gets called for, let's say, domestic abuse or domestic disturbance, or even maybe they're in a car wreck. Okay, so it could be any plethora of what could be determined as a traumatic experience or an event. And law enforcement shows up, or first responders, EMTs show up on scene, and Johnny is there. He is 12. That individual that comes in contact with Johnny is then responsible for putting in what we would call a handle with care. So they would follow the procedure. I don't know that this is spot on, but let's just say procedure was to call dispatch and say, I have a handle with care to report. So they would call that in, say, he is 15 or 12, Johnny, and Kirksville Middle School, right? That's all the information that gets put in. Then that information gets sent on, let's say, to the middle school principal of Kirksville, and then maybe to Johnny's 2 or 3 teachers that he has. And all it says is handle with care. So what that signifies to the school and to the teachers is that Johnny was involved in something that could interrupt his day-to-day activities. So if Johnny doesn't have that homework done, so like you were saying, going back to ISS or OSS, so Johnny comes into school typically and he doesn't have homework done. Well, now he has a detention or he's in ISS because he didn't complete his homework. Well, because Johnny had a handle with care tag, there may be a little lenience to, hey, Johnny, we're going to give you an extra day, or we're going to give you a little extra time to finish that in class today, whatever reason.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of knowing when it's appropriate to give the benefit of the doubt. So, going back into when I was in school, it was based on teachers' emotions or attachment with that youth. So if the teacher knew the kid and knew what was going on at home, she was fine with saying, yeah, I'm going to give you a little extra time. This allows the teachers to know without knowing what happened, so they can make a better judgment call on that. And so that's where that's really important. And all they have to do is be on the same page. So you get the school and law enforcement. That's the only two requirements. So if you have superintendent, principal, whoever it is, and you're like, yes, we need this, talk with your local law enforcement and say, hey, are you guys on board? There's already a system in play that's been utilized. It takes, I think, like 30 seconds at most to put in this handle with care. So it's very simple. The system's existing. And all you have to do is get with MJJA and say, hey, we want to participate. They'll turn that on in their system, and then it's live, and you guys just start reporting the handle with cares. And, and that boils down to how the school sets it up too. So if they get a handle with care, maybe Johnny's first step in the morning is to go talk with the counselor.
Yeah.
Or have the opportunity to, before he even gets into the classroom and counselor says, hey, we had a handle with care. Is there anything you would like to discuss? Like, they don't have to, but starting their day off to get that off of their chest.
Exactly.
Could be a big lift moving forward, because if they're angry, let's say mom got hauled off to jail because of substance use. Okay.
Yeah.
If the kid shows up to school the next day, that's the big thing, right? Well, and if the handle with care comes through and the kid doesn't show up, they may automatically just say, hey, we need to go check or do a wellness check on Johnny and see if everything's okay. But say Johnny does show up to school. Well, first step is Johnny gets the opportunity to have a conversation with a counselor, or in some schools, we have mental health professionals there.
Yeah.
So it may be an immediate referral to the mental health provider in that school. And so he's able to sit down and start already having that counseling set up to help work through that traumatic experience, which is early intervention is key. We know that.
Exactly. And there's research that proves that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you break an arm or even physical illness, you earlier you get to the doctor, the quicker you get healed, the quicker you get the medicine, so on and so forth. Mental health is no different in that aspect. So
exactly. Yeah.
That's where this is key, the handle with care program. So
yes. And I think one of the like non-obvious, most important parts of this whole program is the confidentiality of it all too.
Yes.
You don't need to give details. You don't need to know what's going on at home. Like, that's kind of the child's choice if they want to tell the teachers or the counselors or whoever that. But it just kind of puts a little warning on them to say, hey, something's going on. It's not anyone's business to know. Just know, like, be careful with, not careful, but like treat them with care. Exactly what it is. Handle with care. Yeah. I just really like that they don't know all the details, because sometimes that can make kids more angry and lash out more when it's like, well, how did you know this? Like, who's talking about this? So minimal details, but maximum help in the situation, which I think is really cool.
It is. And it's, like I said, it's one of the newer things that's out, that's showing promise, showing evidence that it's effective. I think it's been out across the US, I think, like, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, give or take. I think it started out originally in Virginia, if I remember right. It's been a minute since I got the origination.
That sounds right.
Yeah. it's been a couple of years since that initial training on it and education. So, but yeah, and it's expanded and it's blew up and it's been a very effective.
Yeah.
So, it's how do you move things forward, but that's also, leads us into that policy and programming and stuff for the school, because a lot of schools aren't equipped what to do in that situation. So if you do go live, that's one area that you can improve your policies and procedures at school.
Yes.
Hey, we're implementing handle with care. How do I notify the parents? How do I notify the kids that this is a new system that is county-wide or city-wide? Just so you guys are aware, here are the options that will be offered if a handle with care comes in, because most of them's like, we got it, now what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So this is a prime opportunity to update those policies and procedures for this instance specifically. So
yeah. And if you're listening and you do want more information on this, or you want to pass it along to your school or law enforcement, you can email us at moprevention@pfh.org, and we will direct you to the right people. Yeah, I'll make sure to get the contact information so that I can answer those emails if they come through. But yeah, it's a really important program that honestly every school should be using. Every partnership with the law enforcement, it helps the kids out in a huge way without them kind of knowing that they're getting helped out.
And it costs nothing. So
and it costs nothing. It's free.
Yeah. So, it's just the willingness to sign on and do that little few extra steps, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you truly care about the kids, it's not extra work at all.
Yeah.
At all.
Exactly. That's a lot of pressure to put on somebody. Good job. Yeah.
Thanks.
If you care. If you care.
If you're in that job for the kids. Yeah, that was a lot of extra pressure.
So, but and I, moving it forward, because I want to be mindful. We could probably sit here and have an hour and a half discussion on a podcast, and it would be nothing for us to do that. But when we talking about policy and procedures, and all seriousness, a lot of the schools aren't equipped for the vaping and substance use concern that we're seeing in the schools right now. And so, like I said, going back to where we started, ISS, OSS is by just a default. That's, you get caught with this and you're out.
Yeah.
And so how do you set a system in place to better help or provide resources to those, instead of just saying, you're bad, go.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so Department of Health and Senior Services, DHSS, in collaboration with DESE, or Department of Education and Secondary Education, have comprised a school model policy around vaping and those areas of concern. So they have a really great template that's out there, checklist. We have some of that as well. Well, I think I have access to all of it, to be honest. But so we can share that to move things forward, and being able to really just reevaluate. And that's, we're in July. July. So, now is your optimal time as school staff administration to really pull those policies and procedures out and use the checklist that's provided with it, and go through your school tobacco vaping policy and say, okay, does it do this? Yes or no? Does it do this? Yes or no? And so the whole idea behind the model policy is to delay the initiation of ISS or OSS.
Yeah.
And I say delay as in, okay, it's not the first, second, or maybe even the third offense. And people are like, that is mind blowing to me. Yes, it is. So we're going to look at, let's say, ISS as a fourth offense. And they're like, well, why would you do that? Well, what do we do with people? And I'm going to put this in perspective to individuals that are suffering from addiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they're at work, we're going to provide resources for them to get help. We're going to try to do everything we can because we know that they're unwell. If they're suffering from a mental health concern, we're going to try to get them the resources to get them the help to make them back to their normal. And I say they're normal because my normal and Kylie's normal is completely different.
Exactly.
Because it's individualized. So why are we not doing that with the youth that Kylie said, you guys care about, and helping them get better? So doing these model policies will really help shift that focus to the youth. So like, for example, purely example. So let's say Kylie's in the bathroom and she gets caught vaping. First offense is going to be maybe a referral to complete a 3-hour vaping program. So it provides her education and quit resources that's available to her. And that's required. That's her punishment for getting caught. So we've initiated education and possibly referral or inquiring about a referral process. Now Kylie's like, all right, week goes by, she's doing great, gets caught again, second time offense. And you're like, all right, Kylie, what now? Right? So now we're going to maybe set you up with the counselor and actually go through some lengthier programming. And now you're going to actually maybe be required to complete a cessation program, or referral out to a mental health counselor if the school has one. Keep that in mind. If the school has one that has a trained cessation teacher and they go through the program as part of the punishment. Now the hopes is, right, after 1 and 2, we've provided resources, we've provided a cessation option, right? That maybe they're going to start weaning off or quit. But as we know with addiction, that would be ideal if it just worked just like that. Odds are it's probably not, and it's going to take some time. So that's why that third offense maybe is not ISS, because we know they're going through the steps. So the third offense now becomes maybe a little more intensive. So it's how can we get more support? Is there another education? Can we set them up if they haven't already with quit line text support? Maybe a more intensive relationship with that counselor, or you know, maybe there's an underlying issue. Maybe they do need some mental health counseling or something else that's underlying. But that third phase is where we're really going to get to the root of it, or try to, right? And then the fourth offense, okay, you got caught again. Okay, now you're going into ISS. Maybe it is the third offense, depends on your school. But like I said, this is just a pure example.
Exactly.
And, you know, there's some resources and some other things out there, such as detectors and other things that can help with this. And I say help with this being, you know, we put in a vape detector in a school and we don't revamp our policies and procedures or anything. It does nothing beneficial except increase the number of kids that we catch because we're looking for it. Right. So the idea is review your policies, update them to the model, get some of the evidence-based curriculums, programs that they're seeing that are working embedded into those offenses, the first, second, and third offense. And if you get all that put in play, then maybe look at a good vape detector or something like that that you can put in, that the objective is to actually help these kids that we're catching. Instead of just catching them to get them in trouble. And that's what we're trying to avoid with that. So first step, which I got it kind of written back here. First step, who knew?
That worked out well.
Yeah, I know, right? not planned at all, I promise. So kind of my ideal setup, right? If you're wanting to put a vape detector or something in the school, number one, be your policy procedure, update those to the model policy, get them aligned. Number two, pick your programming that you want to use. In that resource plethora, we have ample, I say ample, but plenty of programming to choose from that are available either online, in person, things like that.
And it's all, I'm just going to say this really quick.
Yeah.
It all is free. And if it's not free, you can reach out to your local prevention resource center or someone else that can potentially help fund it, or a grant that can help fund it as well.
Correct. Yes. And especially if it's evidence-based and geared, that's the funding streams like to see evidence-based things that tie directly to impact reducing youth substance use. So
yes.
Yeah. And then so policy, procedure, programming, and then we set up supports and referrals. And I say that being like, okay, if the counselor needs trained in how to do something, get them trained in that. If you have a mental health facility or something like that nearby, how do we set that referral process up to streamline it? Because that's the key thing, right? Yeah, you got in trouble and you still haven't got your referral, but you got in trouble again in between there. And that's up to the school, well, better, you shouldn't have done it. Well, yeah, but it's still an addiction and we have to work through it, and they haven't had the time to get the referral. So however you want to set that up, maybe referral goes a little bit more up towards the top to make sure that's put in play. And then we have to implement, right? So there's a big difference, and we see that across the board, whether it's legislation, whether it's policies at city level. You can have the greatest policy and procedures, but if you're not enforcing it or implementing it, it does no good.
Yeah, you have to stay consistent too, especially from kid to kid. You can't have any like special considerations. You have to be consistent for it to pan out the way you want it to.
Yeah. And so making sure that you get it implemented and enforce it. And then last but not least, once you have all those pieces in place, then if you want to add your vape detectors or whatever system you want to put in play to help monitor or do any of that, that would be my very last step that I would recommend doing. Now, is this proven by any science? No, not yet. The hopes is down the road that we'll have some pilot schools that get to kind of go through this process and see how it works and evaluate it and do all that. But based on the information that we readily have right now, that is like your 6th step to success in school prevention with substance use, right? So we'll see. The hopes is that we reduce it, which, most of the parents and adults and people that are listening, well, yeah, if you catch it in this hot spot, what's going to happen? They're probably going to move to another. Well, okay, let's say we stop smoking or vaping in the school and now they're doing it outside. It's a step in the right direction, and then we may need to have to revamp a different policy.
Exactly. And the whole kind of goal, and we have a whole podcast on this, so if you don't know these terms, feel free to kind of look through the podcast. Shameless plug there. There's one on positive and negative reinforcements, and in the situation, you want to make sure that you're coming in with a caring perspective, that you're not coming in saying you're getting punished for this, you did something horribly wrong, you are going to suffer. Like, you want to come in saying, hey, we really care about you. We want you to know what you're putting in your body, what you're doing to your health. We just want you to know this, that you can make healthy decisions for yourself. And just coming in from that perspective of, we care about you, we want the best for you, and just showing kids that the healthy path is there, because sometimes they don't know that. They can't, they don't see a positive, healthy life in their lives sometimes.
depending on where they're brought up or how they're brought up. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah. So that's the good thing about this program or this policy, these steps, is just showing that you care. Like that's number one. Just being a caring adult, showing them that you're there to help them, not to hurt them or punish them or shame them. That's a huge, huge step.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that's kind of key with all of this is getting those trusted adults, those people the kids are comfortable with in play, and having just real conversations. You look back to how prevention's changed over the years, and depending on the age range that we have listening to us, the fried egg, right? Late 80s, early 90s, I think. And then we went from that to scare tactics. Like it was very traumatic to the eyes, so to speak.
Yeah.
And now we've kind of went into more about the truth, just giving the facts, having the conversations with students, and not sugarcoating it, but being mindful at the same time. So, there's a difference in describing like a graphic novel, everything, to purely just giving the education and information that they need to make their own decisions. So like you said, making sure they know how to make a healthy decision and why it's important. Because kids are still kids, and you get somebody, and even Kylie, as young as you are, you're still an adult considered to the kids. So you go in and say, kids, don't do drugs are bad, and leave.
Why should they listen? Yeah.
You're an adult that just said don't do it. Okay, great.
Exactly. Sometimes even peers can't really have that impact. So it's themselves that need to come to the realization, and that's the whole point of Handle with Care, of these policies, is making sure that they're helping themselves too, because that's their biggest influence, right? Is yourself. Like you have the most control of yourself. You know what's going on better than anyone else. So making sure that these youth pick what's best for themselves is really important.
Well,
and that helps sustain. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, that's and that's a valuable piece, because you have to know that kids are still kids. Don't forget that. And so they're going to make decisions to find out what answer or what thing is going to come after that decision. They're curious. They're still kids at heart. And so helping guide those decisions with a calmer demeanor, or, with a caring, passionate shift, is a lot better than, hey, don't do that, and then they go and do it. And, worst case scenario, because we've had some personal connections with it, worst case scenarios, they don't end up making it another day because they wanted to try this because somebody told them not to. And I mean, that's a little bit exaggerated, but,
but that is what it can get to sometimes. That's worst case scenario.
And so, I would much rather have a conversation and take 5, 10, 15 minutes out of my day to have that conversation. If a kid has a question, to be upfront, honest, and open with them. And hopes that I provided enough information or insight that they can make a decision without having to possibly experience that risk.
Exactly. And this is a very, in my opinion, very cheesy phrase, but it's one of the most important phrases. You'll see this on almost every single one of our social media posts. But one conversation can make a huge difference. And that's talking in the substance use realm, that's talking in the mental health realm, that's talking in every single realm that anyone can struggle with. One conversation about vaping could stop a kid from vaping. One conversation about how they matter or the impact that they have could really help them in the mental health realm. So taking 10, 15 minutes out of your day is nothing in the grand scheme of making sure that the youth around us are growing up healthy, cared for, and just making the right decisions. It's so worth it. Even if the conversation is the entire day, it's so worth it to make sure that these kids are making the right decisions and taking care of themselves. It's all worth it to me. If it was a whole week, it'd be worth it.
And there's a big media campaign that's been going around right now, and I'm sure most of you have seen it. So I've got this one other thing, and then I'm going to be quiet after that.
Sounds good.
But so the media campaign that's going out is it shows the daughter that tells her father, "Hey, I'm going out, and don't forget I'm going to this party."
Mm-hmm.
And one scene, he doesn't engage. He lets the door shut. She goes on and makes decisions that night. And the other scene, it's usually side by side, is he goes, "Oh, hey, stop. Come back. Can you tell me a little bit more about the party?" And they start to engage about a conversation like, "Yeah, I know you're going to a party, but I want you to be safe. I want you to make good decisions." In the first scene, she ends up completely plastered, drunk, under the influence, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the second scene, she was responsible, drank water, and really made smart decisions just from having that conversation. So it can really change that trajectory of the night, the evening, the day, and how those decisions are made from a youth standpoint.
Yeah. And
even though it's so minor.
Exactly. Yeah. What Cory is talking about is a commercial by SAMHSA. And we are actually, you might see that on Spotify. I think that's the one that I posted this month. So if you see an ad, that's Talk They Hear You. That's the whole campaign. It's Talk They Hear You. And it's a really great campaign that talks about a lot of different substances. So yeah, definitely give that a look if you don't know what he's talking about. All their campaigns are on their website, or just listen to a bunch of Spotify, and then hopefully you'll hear our ads.
Yeah. And so my final thing, and it kind of ties it all out. So it's kind of neat how it just makes a full circle. And we're almost at an hour. So, hey, is I challenge our listeners. I challenge anybody that may come in contact with this. If you skip over everything and you get to the end, I challenge whoever's listening to it to take 15 minutes out of your day, a day, to engage a stranger, youth, adult, to have a meaningful conversation. And I say meaningful as in, we go to the store and we go, "Oh, hey, how are you?" "Good." And we just keep walking. Have a meaningful conversation. Like, "Hey, do you know anything about what's going on with this? Or could I tell you a little bit about this?" Sounds weird, sounds cheesy, sounds hard, but maybe, how many times are we standing in line waiting? You have 5 minutes to engage in a conversation, and maybe you take that 15 minutes and split it across 3 people. That is fine. But I engage you and challenge you guys that are listening to engage in that 15 minutes of meaningful conversation. And I say with a stranger because it gives them perspective and it gives you perspective. And it's the first step into having those type of conversations to understand somebody else's point of view. So, we always get too quick to judge a book by its cover or judge a situation without even having a conversation. And I think I use homeless sometimes as an example, but you see somebody and they're digging in their pocket for change at a gas station, and we're like, "Man, why would immediate thoughts start coming to mind." Well, just ask, "Hey, how's everything going today?" Maybe they just lost their house to a fire. Or maybe, and they're down on their luck. I'm not saying pay for their food. I'm not saying do that, but it gets into that random acts of kindness and just engaging, because I think we treat people differently when we know the full story.
Exactly.
And the same goes with our youth. So once we understand it a little better, once we know that there was a traumatic experience, it's like we backpedal to save face, so to speak. And if we knew that going into it, it would make the whole trajectory shift moving forward. So I challenge everybody for that.
Yeah, that was very well said. And that's a fantastic challenge. So And if you're listening, pass that challenge on to a friend or do it with a friend. I think that would be cool too. I think that's an amazing challenge. Well, thank you so much, Cory, for all of your knowledge on this podcast and our past podcasts. You're amazing in this field. All of our community members are so lucky to have you. So thank you for all the work that you've done for prevention. And yeah, just thank you for everything that you've done.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. So, I mean, I enjoy these and I can talk. So we know that.
Yeah. Hey, that's the best though. Cool. Well, to all of our listeners, thank you guys so much for listening. Be sure to tune in. Hopefully next week is going to be another podcast post. So be sure to tune in. And just thank you for your support and for listening. Have a great day, everyone. Bye, everyone.
You as well. Bye.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into our podcast. Remember to follow us on social media at PFH Prevention. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Spotify, and more podcasting platforms. And make sure to email us at moprevention@pfh.org with any questions and